Good evening. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm sure there are no football games, no basketball games on, anything. Changes. We're here tonight to have an open forum on the possibility of establishing a marijuana growing facility here in Halifax. And we're looking for opinions. All I ask is that you respect the person next to you. If someone's speaking, please don't try to cut them off, and we'll try to make it run as smooth as possible. And we'll start off with a presentation by Alexander.
Thank you.
And Mr. Donorski.
Should we get started?
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending and giving me the opportunity to bring you some information on what my company is proposing here in Halifax. My name is Alex Mason, and tonight I'll be talking about a one-season harvest here in Halifax for an outdoor cultivation located at 111 River Street. Just to iterate something, we're actually not planning to build a structure of any sorts on a year-round structure on the location. The only thing that would be built is a modern-day barn, and then the rest is all outdoor agricultural use. So I'm just going to walk everyone through the presentation on what we're proposing, and then I'd love to open it up to questions, answer any concerns that the community has. I'm sure not all of you are here to support this, but I hope I can answer your questions and ease your concerns tonight and have an open dialogue on this topic. So, some quick information about buds. We've been in the medical marijuana industry since 2016 here in Massachusetts. We originally were under a company by the name of Trichome Health Corp. We then later changed our name to Buds, Goods, and Provisions. Our mission is really just to have a low impact on the environment, be a good neighbor and partner to the community, and to normalize and legalize and regulate cannabis here in the state of Massachusetts. In 2017, I received my very first medical license from the state, the Department of Public Health here in Massachusetts. That was for a location in Lakeville, which is not too far from here. And then just recently this year, we've received a handful of other licenses under the adult use program from the Cannabis Control Commission, which included a cultivation license, a product manufacturing license, and so far 2 additional retail locations, one in Lakeville and one in Worcester. Again, I want to reiterate what we're proposing tonight. Product manufacturing is not part of it. This is strictly an outdoor cultivation. So a little bit background about myself. I started in the healthcare. I grew up in Worcester. I ended up graduating from college in the Boston area and spending almost a decade in the healthcare industry, where I focused on the commercial side of drug development once a product is approved by the FDA, and I focused on emerging markets and emerging technologies. And that's how medical marijuana and that topic came into my life. In 2015, I started my very first company called Vapor Case, where we manufacture silicone accessory products for the marijuana and vaporizer industry. And that's how I really started to dabble into the cannabis space. And so, between having a corporate background in the healthcare industry and an entrepreneurial background in the cannabis industry, it seemed like a good fit to continue to pursue the medical marijuana industry back in 2015 and 16. Ben Nadolny is my VP of Operations. He oversees our retail and our cultivation plans. He moved out here 2 years ago from Oregon, where he was part of their medical marijuana and adult use market. Prior to getting into the cannabis industry, Ben was the executive chef of King Estate, which is the largest Pinot Grigio grower here in the United States. He was the executive chef for 10 years, where he was awarded a 1-star Michelin award. Greg Zarnowski is here with me this evening. He is my VP of Community Relations. Greg's been working with us for over 2 years. His background is really in community relations and engagement, public relations. Previously to joining Buds, Greg spent his career working for Patriot Care, which was the first medical license operator in the city of Boston. He helped them navigate those difficult regulatory hurdles in the city and also helped them receive licenses in Greenfield and Lowell. Predominantly his job is education, which is where he started his original career, which was in education. And education is the key, I think, to this industry, to helping people understand what the cannabis industry is all about and its benefits to communities and to the state. And I'm happy to get into all of that with questions after. So this is the parcel of land that we're looking at. Some of you may recognize it, some of you may not. Very quickly, this is River Street. This up here is the solar field that I think most of you are aware of that exists right now. And so this is a 47-acre parcel lot that is currently not being utilized in any manner, and it's where we are proposing to do a seasonal outdoor grow operation. When I say seasonal, I mean we would plant in May, we would harvest end of September, early October, and then from October to May of the next year, there would be nothing at this location. There'd be no additional traffic. We would just clean up and then reset once a year. So 111 River Street, as I mentioned, is a 47-acre parcel of land that is currently zoned in the industrial zone here in the town of Halifax, which is where the zoning bylaws allow adult use marijuana here in Halifax. We would obviously still need to go through special permit process from the zoning board to get the special permit. This site is not located within 500 feet of anything. It is a 47-acre plot of land. But with that said, it abides by all local and state regulations in terms of distances from where children gather, schools, parks, daycares, so forth and so on. And so this property is perfectly zoned here in Halifax for marijuana use. And I want to reiterate, no consumption happens at this location. This is not a retail store, it is not a product manufacturing. We are actually building our product manufacturing facility in Lakeville, Massachusetts. What we're trying to accomplish here is to grow enough supply so we can process it in Lakeville. So what we did is we hired a civil engineer to take a look at what is possible with this lot of land given the wetland restrictions and so forth and so on. And again, just want to reiterate, this is River Street and this is the solar field. And so what I'm here proposing tonight is to basically build a modern day barn which would just house our equipment for the season, and then to start off with a phase 1 of 100,000 square foot outdoor cultivation. So that's about 2.2 acres of land that we would utilize of this 47 acres in total. The reason we are doing 100,000 square feet, and I did see on the Facebook Halifax page, there was some discussion about this, so I do want to answer it. The state right now limits our growing capacity to 100,000 square feet, both indoor and outdoor. So we are maximizing that license by doing 100,000 square feet. However, there are discussions already happening at the state level which would allow for larger outdoor cultivations to happen in the years to come because of multiple reasons. One of them being environmental impact is very low on outdoor. Costs to do an outdoor cultivation is lower, and also we need supply in this state, and if we continue to grow everything in the state of Massachusetts, the greenhouse gas emissions are just not sustainable, and the environmental impact we would have by just doing these things indoor would be very hazardous to our utility grid system. And so that is why I'm proposing an outdoor facility which utilizes nothing from the utility here, no electrical, no gas. I know there was a question around water. We plan to drill a well and use that for our resources to water this. We would not build any structures like greenhouses besides the barn, which is about 5,000 square feet is what we would anticipate to need. The benefits of this to the town of Halifax is local jobs would be created, a substantial amount of them, both full-time and part-time. Next is revenue for the community. And then lastly, the agriculture and environmental revitalization. So right now, a lot of that land is unusable because of the soils. What we would do is our first harvest would basically pull all of the metals out of the soils, and then we would do our first real round of harvest. One of the benefits of cannabis or hemp is its ability to revitalize soils in the ground. And since this parcel of land once had factories on it, we would probably start off that way. So recleaning this entire 47 acres would be eventually one of the goals, but we would start with 100,000 square feet. So getting right into the honest opportunity here, which is financial gains, is we anticipate to grow about 5,700 pounds of cannabis in this 100,000 square feet. The current pricing for cannabis in today's market at the wholesale level, for those of you that don't know, is about $4,000 to $4,200 a pound, which retails for about $6,400 to $6,600 a pound. In our projections, we're going to sell a pound of wholesale for $1,700, which I indicate right there. At $1,700, which is 50% less than today's average wholesale pricing, and selling 5,700 pounds, we estimate that we could generate about $9.75 million of revenue. The host community agreement that we've been in discussions with this town would allow for the maximum impact fee, which is 3% of revenue. So that's about $293,000 in one season of tax revenue that would be generated for the community. Now this is only on 100,000 square feet. I do anticipate that rule changing at the state level over the next few years, and so as that changes, we would come back and request to continue to expand our 100,000 square foot capacity, and if that were to occur, you could very quickly see how the impact fee continues to grow. The reason this 600,000 is capped is when we hired our civil engineer, going back to this page, we learned that we could fit about 600,000 square feet of growing at its peak capacity without infringing on any wetland boundaries or requiring any variances. So that's why that number's there. But if we only did 100,000 square feet, it would produce about $300,000 for the community. And again, that's only through from May to October. I think our impact would be minimal on the community in the sense that we don't think we would need many resources to be needed from the community. We don't need any additional snow plowing like many other operators do in the state because we're not open in the winter. We don't need any of those additional services. So we also are partners with an operator in California. This is one of our farms out in California. It's currently 617 acres. The reason I point that out is I think if someone is going to do this in your community, it should be someone with a tremendous amount of experience to make sure it's done correctly, professionally, and responsibly. And so I'm throwing these images out there not to scare anyone, because again, you're looking at 600 acres. I'm only proposing 2. But we have the know-how and the professional capability to do it because we do it. One of the concerns I know that the communities have are around security. So I want to really dive into the security components of what we're planning, what we're proposing. First off, we would do, what we're proposing is probably an 8 to 10 foot fence that would go around the entire perimeter of the property. That would not be a see-through fence. It would have like vinyl between the fencing to keep that out. We would also be putting up posts on all corners, centrally on all sides, and so we'll be able to surveillance the entire property 24/7, even when we're not functioning technically, because those will be out there. But we can surveil it during the day and during the night, and that really is fully secured. We would work closely with the Halifax Police Department so they have access to those videos if necessary, and we would work on developing the security plan that they feel most comfortable with. And we could include that as one of our requirements in our special permit that the police department would have to sign off on such a thing. We've been working with Platinum Security as our vendor. Platinum Security does about 30 to 40% of the facilities here currently built in Massachusetts. They have a lot of experience building security, cultivations, retails, product manufacturing. And so it's actually a lot easier to monitor and keep secure an outdoor facility because there aren't any walls or nooks and crannies for theft to occur in those senses. And you also know exactly what's happening because the whole cultivation is on the same schedule. So in an indoor facility, you have a couple rooms here and there every few weeks that are being harvested. And so there's a lot more turning constantly. For an outdoor cultivation, it really is the end of September, early October. There's no way around it. That's when you harvest. And so here's some of the security parameters we're suggesting. So perimeter fencing with privacy slats, access controlled gates, high definition cameras, video footage 24/7. We would keep those on record for 90 days in the event the state or the local police department needs them for any reason. All of our cannabis would be tracked and tagged with RFID tags, and the data would be documented into the state metric system. So the metric system really tracks any plant in the state that's over 6 inches tall to the point it's harvested. So just an analogy to use is, imagine if you bought a bottle of wine, and when you bought that bottle of wine, you knew what vineyard it came from, which grape, what row, what vine it was in which row on the vineyard, who picked that grape, who made that wine, all on that label. And so the same thing happened, that really does happen here in cannabis where it doesn't in alcohol, to the point where you know exactly who grew your cannabis, what table it was grown on, what field it was grown in, what all parameters of that plant are. As I mentioned, we'll work very closely with the police department here, and all of our employees have to be registered with the state. Every employee in the Massachusetts cannabis industry has to receive a registered agent card. They get background checks, screenings on an annual basis. So just to give you a little confidence in our employee base. That's the really quick, simple presentation that I had for the community. I know there are a lot of questions, and I'm happy to take them one at a time.
Tom?
Yes?
How solid is that 3% for the host community agreement? I heard that there's some fluctuation going on in that in the state. Is that a solid number?
So 3% is the state's maximum allowance for the host community impact fee. What's happening...
What's it related to, though, is what I'm getting at.
The 3% is related to revenue.
No, I understand, but do we have to show expenses that,
The 3% host community fee does have, how you spend it does need to be documented by the community, in the event the state ever does ask for that information. And so the fee is really intended to be an impact fee, meaning it's to be used to offset any impact we may have on the community.
I understand. My point being is that if there isn't $300,000 worth of impact to the community, it potentially could not be that kind of number.
Tom, I did talk to the Cannabis Control Commission this morning about that. The guidance is, as you pointed out, the thing what the Cannabis Control Commission has said is, in essence, you have an agreement, you have an agreement. We're not, as much as the town will be obligated to document any expenses that we incur, whether it's additional police presence, whether we have to do more highway work or anything. If we document it, that's great, but they're not going to be monitoring the sense of have an annual report from the town showing, let's say we bring in 100,000, we spend 15, they're gonna say, nope, you gotta refund the 85. They're not going anywhere like that. They've said also the Department of Revenue is not going to set up a system where the town has to refund the various license holders. Now, long-term, what may very well happen is that you have all the cultivators and you have the retail stores and everything else signing these agreements at the 3%. I think most of them are at that point. After 5 years, the agreements expire, and then they're going to be renegotiated. It may very
Parameters
well
could be different.
5 years from now, who knows what the market's going to be like or anything like that, but it may, as you point out, be very different. It may be, I'm not saying these folks in particular, but just in general, it may be that the marijuana facilities are going to come back to the cities and towns and say, look, here's what it was meant to be. We signed everything in good faith with you. We agreed with the 3%. There's no coercion. In fact, Bud's Goods came to the town and said, we'd like to present an agreement with 3%. The town didn't demand that.
Right.
But 5 years from now, or whenever the agreement would end, Bud's Goods or some other vendor could come to the town and say, well, we want to renegotiate. We want the impact fee to be X% rather than 3%, that more resembles what the town is actually spending. Unlike a retail facility, the major income source for the town will be this impact fee. We'll get some additional money from property taxes because more than likely, you're on the board of assessors, the value of the property will be looked at on an income producing basis rather than any other basis. It's not an agricultural product because the state has said that unlike, for instance, hemp, marijuana is not an agricultural product. That's why the zoning is a bit different for that. So we'll look at an income approach, we'll get additional property taxes above and beyond what we're getting right now. But the major source of revenue for the town for something like this would be the community impact fee. Unlike a retail store, where you have a couple of streams. You have the community impact fee, but you also have the sales tax, which has no restrictions, nothing like that about the impact fee. But for right now, given my conversation, we would be safe that, I'm not saying the numbers are right, but whatever we did bring in, we would be allowed to use for other purposes. That said, given that it's a limited term agreement, and given that the market will fluctuate, we should be looking at it not as operating revenue for operating purposes.
No, that would be a huge mistake.
Right, but for capital purposes, or to sock it away, or to pay down our debts, if we ever did come into that.
I
Or
just wanted
simple
to,
things like improving River Street would be easily a documented expense that says we needed these funds to make River Street more.
of course, a lot of that's in Middleborough, so it gets a little.
My side of River Street's in Halifax.
How about Wood Street? Can you go back to the illustration there of the, yeah, right there, right there.
This one?
Yep. At
So
the top of the screen, at the center, what is that?
this back here,
Nope, a little bit more over to the right.
Between 3 and 4.
Right there, right there. What is that?
so that is a private road for that entire
To
farm.
what street?
This goes
The
back
access road.
1,500
Wood
acres.
Street?
No, that's the access road through the field.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the access road through my property, but besides the point.
Yeah.
We're,
Because-
we're asking, if you're gonna fix up River Street, you're gonna have traffic coming down Wood Street, you're gonna have it coming down Full Street,
You're gonna have coming in.
Our
You're gonna have it coming
What
down.
kind of-
Excuse me. One at a time, please.
Okay.
Our traffic impact is minimal. It requires a lot less people, well, it requires a lot less labor than an indoor cultivation facility. And so during the months between November and March, we really do anticipate having one car a week come through just to check on the property. Between the months of April and October, when we are cultivating, we expect 6 to 8 vehicles per day. And then in October, there will be a 2-week increased hike where we'll see probably 10 to 12 cars per day.
Trucks.
Not trucks, cars. Yes.
So going up, my name's Kim. I
Hi, Kim.
don't live in that area. But different concerns, you say that cars are, but you're also saying that you need to transport X amount of pounds, and you're talking about thousands of pounds in a season, to Lakeville. So what size car are you using? What type of weight are you using? You're heading over to a part of town that roads, and excuse my language for lack of a better word, are extremely shitty.
Yes, I'm aware. I've
So,
driven it many times.
And even though River Street may be in some of Middleborough, you're gonna be taking the back roads because it's quicker and more efficient for you to use the other ways to Lakeville. So what type of weight, what type of vehicles are we talking about? You say cars.
So 5,700 pounds could fit in probably 3 white GMC 2500 vans. So it's not like 18-wheelers or anything like
Right,
that.
but with all due respect, a 2500 van weighs the same amount as a 2500 pickup truck.
Well,
So you
I
don't
don't
need a
know
dump truck or an
anything.
18-wheeler, but the 2500 isn't like having a Honda Civic on that road. It's not a car, it's a utility commercial van, which weighs a great deal. It is going to have an impact on those roads.
I do want to point out that those cars moving that 5,700 pounds would probably be 2 days a year. Because this is a seasonal business, it will be 2 days in October that weight is moved over to Lakeville, and then that's it. It's not a continuous weekly or monthly thing. Yes, sir.
I'm not, opposed to it, but the impact fee that you talk about, I know you talk about the police department, and I agree with the donation and, the access that you can provide to them. But I think what the impact fee of the town should be to dress it up a little bit and pave some roads and do some drainage.
Well, the town decides how to spend
Yeah.
that money.
Yeah.
I wish I could listen to the community and make my argument to do this and use the funds this way and that way. At the end of the day, we would pay a host community agreement fee, and the town decides how it's spent and used. I've had that brought up many times in other communities. I wish I could have a voice in that, because I would love to see it go towards schools and roads and things like that, but that's up to the town officials. Yes, sir.
You stated you anticipate the laws to change, to allow more to be grown.
Correct.
How come the Cannabis Commission would say they have no knowledge of that, and they don't anticipate that anytime soon?
The Cannabis Control Commission will never acknowledge something until it's a fact. It's just what a regulatory body does. But because of the social injustices that are created with indoor cultivation growing, this is a big discussion topic for the CCC. And what I mean by that is, because indoor cultivations, a 20,000 square foot cultivation costs about $15 million to build. And so when you make that type of investment, you have to make your prices on your products very high. So what's ending up happening is really, not many people can buy $15 grams with 20% tax on it. And so one of the benefits of outdoor cultivation is we can bring down the pricing of products for the market significantly. And that has a greater, more positive impact for people in less fortunate economic situations to have access to legal cannabis. And so that is why this discussion is happening at the state level. But it's, I'm telling you what I know is happening versus I think it's going to take a few years. And if you look at what I'm proposing here, and I still think it's going to take 2+ years to change that rule. I don't think it's gonna happen overnight, and so that's why the state's not,
You also state the sources where you got those figures from?
which figures?
And any of them, like yield, price per pound?
So the yield comes from what we're doing out in California, minus 20%, because
Because when you look at the other states, the prices are a lot lower for outdoor grow, so I wasn't sure where you got that price from.
so this is, what we're doing is we're taking a 50% discount on outdoor grow products that are here in Massachusetts. Because we don't have a wholesale outdoor market, there's no such thing here in Massachusetts right now. It's very hard to dictate what the pricing will be, but I do know that right now, greenhouse flower is selling for about $3,600, so we took a 50% discount on that.
So, the Cannabis Commission just gave provisional licenses out in Berkshires for 2 big outdoor growing facilities.
They can't be larger than 100,000 square feet.
Well, as more of these come online, like the other states, we might not get anywhere near what those values are.
I think, my personal belief is my price per pound is very low on my forecast. Based on what we're seeing in this market.
Cannabis index, and again, Massachusetts would be slightly higher, but the current rate is.
Not slightly, a lot.
No, actually, it's slightly higher, but it's $1,146, which is a big difference from 1,700. Now, I granted it's slightly higher, but it's not.
And
gonna be
again,
as close as
I don't mean to come off route, it's not.
Okay.
Because right now, in Colorado, and in Oregon, and in Washington, which are the key states to look at,
Yeah.
your average price per pound is about $1,500. Here in Massachusetts, it's $4,200 a pound, which is a 3.5x greater. So if you take that number you're seeing on average and apply a 3.5x greater, you're gonna get back to that normal
You have a
number.
Lakeville facility, right?
Yes,
What size is that?
it's 25,000 square feet.
So you're saying that you want to build a 100,000 square foot facility in Halifax, correct?
No, a 100,000 square foot outdoor grow.
Correct. Okay, so would that be $75,000, 75,000 square feet for the marijuana?
No.
So you can't exceed 100,000 square feet among your 3 licenses?
No, as I mentioned, I said our Lakeville facility will be a manufacturing only facility.
But
We will
you
not
said on
be,
here it's a cultivator license.
we have a cultivator license there, but we're not planning to use
But,
it.
okay. So you have a cultivator license, you're not planning on using.
Not in Halifax, because I don't believe.
not in
in- Sorry, not in Lakeville. I took a step back and I said, building an indoor facility is very costly and has tremendous negative impact on the environment. So I decided not to do it in Lakeville and started my pursuit in doing an outdoor cultivation and utilizing Lakeville as a
So you have a
feeder.
license, but you're not planning on using it?
We would transfer it actually over to Halifax, which is allowed under the CCC
Yes, it
guidelines. Yes,
I'm curious with the, in outdoor cultivation. I was talking to the Farm Bureau, and they find it extremely odd.
what?
So, just outdoor cultivation. So, I'm curious to know if you've ever been in contact with the Farm Bureau or if they have any form of support for you, because they're a huge supporter of making sure that hemp farmers are getting a fair shake. And they're not against cultivation. So I'm curious why the Farm Bureau is finding it outdoor cultivation odd.
Did you ask them what aspect they found to be odd?
Yeah, the fact that it's outside, and how you're gonna control it, and how you're gonna control the odor, and multiple other things. They kind of thought the proposal that was sent to them was completely odd, ridiculous, and undoable.
So what we are actually growing for is not for flower sales and production. What we're actually growing for is what we call in the industry biomass. Biomass is the product you use to create extract and distillate oil. It's not flour. The best analogy I could give you is we're not growing tomatoes to sell in the produce aisle. We're growing tomatoes to make ketchup and tomato sauce. And so in those environments, we don't have to regulate or control them as greatly like an indoor cultivation. There are real big risks in growing it outdoor in the sense that you may have some crop failure, but because that's less of a concern to us, so if 1/5 of our crop does not pan out the way pans out, we can dispose of it and remove it according to the regulations, but we're still satisfied with our 80% yield that we did receive. So I have not reached out to the Farming Bureau as that you're alluding to. I don't think they have a lot of knowledge around cannabis growing in general because it is so new here in the state of Massachusetts, but I will definitely make sure to reach out and see what's odd in their opinion.
The entire market is new in the United States. It's not even a decade old, so there's a lot of new around. So, just because you have experience doesn't mean the regulators and us, they're concerned, and I don't even not support you know, it is, it's new, I agree.
Yes, of course.
But it's unfair to say.
But, that's why, between myself and the partners that we have, we're one of the few operators here in the country that do have that capacity and that experience. Yes, Ms.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree they should be in the loop.
Of course, and this is a preliminary discussion, as I allude to here, we wouldn't really plan on doing anything till 2021. There's a lot of things that we need to still get through in order to get to the point where we're growing. It's not like a yes tomorrow turns the flip and the following day it's an operation. There's still a lot of regulation to get through, and during that period is when we usually tend to engage with key stakeholders to discuss all of their opinions.
But that wasn't my question. My question was, so given the fact that, you mentioned 600 acres wherever, that is 600 acres there, between
In California.
Halifax. Okay, so.
Wait, in California or Halifax?
Halifax. That's 600 acres.
This property that I'm talking about is
Okay, but what
47.
I'm getting at is they're building solar panels. And solar panels are very hot, and you're talking about your crop failing, and so I'm saying, are you competing, do you understand what the repercussions are gonna be as much as that solar farm expands and you're over here and they're over there and, I don't know, I mean, it just.
I
seems a
apologize, I
weird-
don't understand
What's the
what your
question?
question
Yeah, what's the
is.
Okay,
question?
so there's a solar farm being built.
Yes,
Yeah, where you're building.
it's already built for the
Right.
majority of it, yes.
Yeah, so you're not worried about them expanding or
No, I mean,
impact on your crop?
no, not at all.
Okay.
We have no concerns about that.
May I?
Yes.
It's no different than opening up a grocery store in a Spanish neighborhood and you don't have any Spanish food. You don't get the business that you want to get. It's the same type of thing. The Cannabis Committee has bounced back and forth. It took them over, 2 years before they even made a decision on who could do what. They're still in the growing stages. So I'm not saying I'm advocating for it or not, I'm just saying, stating the point. Things change, just like in town.
And I think what's nice about what we're proposing is if things do change, we're a seasonal business in the sense where in October, we pack up our bags and we leave the field, plowed and harvested like
What I'm
before.
saying with solar farms is all their energy is coming in those months too, and it's not gonna impact you, I mean, I.
No, the sun is very large. It can feed the solar
What
field.
is it? That's the feed coming from
It's gonna dry out your
field,
plants.
that are gonna drive your
Very
plants.
good.
No, I don't think that.
Okay.
So you're talking about the fence is gonna surround the area, is it gonna surround just the 100,000 square feet or is it gonna do the whole 47 acres?
I would propose that we just fence off, not only the 100,000, maybe a little bit larger, but I wouldn't do a fence around the whole 47 acres to start. That seems,
So you said it'll have the,
it'll have like grates between so you won't be able to see through it, and it will be 8 to 10 feet tall, so.
is there gonna be like barbed wire? and
No, there will not be.
So is it gonna, right now the solar panels are there and they've got 3 very bright lights in their field. What
We-
kind of light, are you gonna have lights like that?
No, there will be no lighting, because lighting actually distracts the plant while it's sleeping. And so if it distracts the plant while it's sleeping, it won't grow.
So it goes back to that question though. The solar field has large capacity lights that are going
Right,
24 hours
which is
a day.
why we would tarp the plant.
Okay, I think that's what she was worried about though.
What
Is
impact
are you
is solar,
thinking-
yeah.
What impact is the solar farm gonna have on your operation? Because of the fact that there's excessive heat and there's excessive light and all that sort of stuff.
Why wouldn't you push for the solar fields to kill the lights at night? So you wouldn't have to time it.
Because they got security.
I mean,
That's security.
Yeah.
That's their
I don't know what their
security.
security protocols are, and to be honest, I haven't
sorry,
ventured
what's your
that
name
far
again?
down conversations with them.
3 meetings
You know, all I know is my impact would be less than theirs, significantly. Yes, you could.
Thanks. I actually live on River Street, so I have a couple concerns.
Okay.
One, I get your proposal about the increase of vehicles and you're saying it's slight, but in reality, it's not going to be. Your security is minimal, right? It's a fence and a camera. It's really not gonna stop people from trying to get in, so I'm assuming that our police force is probably gonna have a bigger presence in driving by and things like that. Especially in the summer months where my kids are riding bikes on the streets. Like, that's not ideal for my situation. The whole reason why I moved to Halifax is for less. The other part of it is, can you actually guarantee that there's no smell all summer long?
So the plant really produces odor in the last 3 weeks of harvest. But other times, it's not producing any odors. Now, you brought up a couple things that I kind of
know,
want to
so I was
touch
trying
upon.
to get in there.
Yeah, don't worry. So first off, that's why we're proposing to put the first 100,000 square feet in the middle, is because there's about, 2.5 acre radius around that location to keep it as far as we can from the streets for any children to have things like that. The second thing is, with regards to theft and security and all that, although it may seem minimal, it's our largest expense to put this up. We will be spending about $150,000 on cameras and fencing and gates and all of those things. But what I do want to point out is, first off, there have been no crimes related to marijuana companies today yet here in Massachusetts of like theft. Maybe petty theft internally by employees, but not externally. The second thing is, these plants will get to about 6 or 7 feet in height. And you can only, I hope no one here is a thief, but I'll tell you the secrets if you were. It makes no sense to steal a plant, a cannabis plant. And the reason it doesn't make any sense would be the same if you're in a vineyard and you steal grapes. That doesn't mean you've stolen wine, right? And the same thing applies to cannabis in that regard, which is it takes weeks after the plant is actually grown to turn it into consumable cannabis. You have to cure it correctly and dry it correctly, and that takes 7 to 10 days in an enclosed facility. And so, first off, most thieves who are trying to steal marijuana are going to be aware that it makes no sense to steal a plant. Second of all, these plants are pretty heavy and they're pretty large. So one would have to, go over an 8 or a 10-foot fence, and the most they could probably get is maybe 1 or 2 plants, which is very small in terms of a financial gain. And so if I was a thief, I think the goal, and maybe the police chief can chime in here, is if I were a thief, I would try to steal the most valuable thing that's the smallest.
I'm not thinking of the maybe adult entrepreneur who's trying to have their own marijuana facility. I'm thinking of the teenagers that are out and about doing stupid things, trying to climb over walls and maybe getting hurt or just having a presence there. So it may be taking our resources from our...
You're just talking about mischievous behavior.
Right, but
Okay.
it doesn't take away from our police having to patrol the area or having to do that.
And that's part of the impact fee, is exactly to be used for that, which is if the police chief feels like he needs an extra detail to make an extra drive every few hours down River Street just to check
More
on it.
traffic, especially at night, and it's temporary. This percentage could change,
Which percentage?
the fee that we're talking about.
So
right?
one of the things that wasn't mentioned is, without a host community agreement, we can't renew our license with the state. So it sort of still gives leverage in the renewal to the community to always continue to get what they've been getting. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned that you're not going to be producing the flower, but the extract, which to me sounds like dab oil and vape juice, those kinds of things. But with Governor Baker, what he's trying to do right now is ban all of those things across the board. Would that, if that continued to happen, would that kill a lot of door sales?
No, when you look at sales in cannabis, and you have about 40% coming from flower, and then 60% is everything else, right? Of that 60%, about 30% of that 60%, not half of it, just a third of that 60%, not to confuse anyone, is vape cartridges. So Governor Baker's effort, which by the way is being lifted tomorrow morning, he would have to reissue. It's not a temporary renewal. He would have to reissue the ban properly, coming around if he wants to.
Right, but I don't think his fight is over, so I think he'll probably get back.
So what I was saying anyway is we actually focus on topicals, tinctures, and oil ointments, so droplets and things like that. We actually don't focus very heavily for our production on vape cartridges. We're more in the edibles, topicals, tinctures, and pills and tablets, things like that.
Alex,
Yes,
the young lady had a question.
yes.
Yeah, just a quick comment. The outdoor grow is far more palatable than an indoor grow for sure. Is there any impact on the property values? I'm also on River Street. Is there any data that?
In Colorado, we have seen that property values have grown quicker on average than not. So Denver, for example, property values increased 25% greater than the U.S. average growth at that period of time.
No, immediately surrounding
Yeah, next
facilities.
to it.
Not dispensaries.
Yes, commercial, yes.
Yeah, well, Realty.com just had an article just read that on average across the state, it's decreased 8.4%. And there's a number of communities that are going out there to actually ban farming, open farming, because of the fact that it's decreasing the property values for the residential areas that are surrounding the thing. And according to my calculations that I did last night, that's a $262,000 decrease in property tax for Wood Street, River Street, and Pratt Street.
I think right now the lot sits vacant and it doesn't.
It generates $2.4 million in property tax at the moment.
All 1,500 acres of it does, not the 47
Correct,
acres.
yes. I'm just saying, we are getting property tax from the property, so it's
Right,
not like we're not getting anything from a piece of property. It's just-
My business value on that commercial property would be much greater than its value sitting vacant in tax revenue. Because industrial and commercial property values on tax is based on the revenues that land
Right.
can generate, not
So
like residential.
how does our property tax calculation work based on their sales?
It would be on their sales, the
Right.
income approach,
Right.
I&E.
I don't know how the local tax on property
So,
works.
because right now the property tax, for that particular area, we would lose that and we'd go over to a property tax based on sales. Then you would factor in the potential decrease in the property tax around, since we can actually, our property tax doesn't change. So that means if we don't make up enough there, then the impact on the property tax goes to all the other
Well, keeping in mind
residents.
that we're talking about mass appraisals now.
Yeah,
So, it isn't individual. I mean, it would have to trend,
right.
and then it would have to go across the whole town, and the areas would literally have to pick an area to say that this is a different assessing area.
Correct.
Which would be, down the road quite a ways. I mean, I don't see that happening immediately.
To answer your question, it's hard to confirm what a industrial use would have on impact on a residential property. What I can tell you is if you're comparing commercial to commercial or industrial to industrial, values of properties do increase. I don't know, we don't have any proof out there of what real estate properties cost when next to industrial properties that do cannabis. Typically, real estate properties near industrial zones tend to trend less valuable because they are closer to an industrial zone to begin with. And so that is always factored in to the real estate price residential that's around industrial properties.
But these are also single-family homes. So back to my original comment of, you're saying, okay, 3 weeks out of the year, it's gonna smell like marijuana.
No, I'm not, I didn't say that. I said for 3 weeks, the plant would produce odors, but I don't anticipate those odors on 100,000 square feet because we do plan on putting it on a 47-acre parcel of land, that those odors would mitigate to the residences.
But
The
your intention
closest-
is to grow.
The closest residence to where we're growing is 1,700 feet, which is almost half a mile away.
That's really not that far.
It is when there's an entire earth. Yes, sir.
The previous proposal, when another company wanted to do indoor growing
They
there,
wanted to do a
they admitted
greenhouse.
there would be smells to neighborhoods, and there was be scrubbing it, cleaning the air.
And that's because they have a staggered growing cycle. So they're producing odors every single day. And when you, in an indoor environment, you're constantly every 2 weeks harvesting. So you're producing constantly. With here, it's kind of like a peak in a valley, and it's one time a year. And it will produce the same amount of revenue that facility that was going to be open all year round would produce. So my impact, I'm producing as much revenue as that facility would for the community, but I'm only here for 6 months of the year.
But your intention is to grow larger. You've pretty much stated that because you've projected your
It
numbers.
says phase one.
It says phase
It's
one.
phase one. Phase is-
But his
So
thing
when
is
I'm
up
ready-
to 600,000.
When I'm ready to retire and resell my home someday, how am I gonna do that when in the summer it smells like marijuana in a single family home that people with children are gonna wanna move into? Like, that's not logical for a resident. That's gonna decrease the value of my home and the surrounding homes.
Like I said, we do not feel that this would impact the air near your homes because of the distance.
But can you prove
The
that?
distance doesn't mean anything. If my house faces south on River Street, and the wind, prevailing wind is always from the south, and every time there's a storm, the front of my house gets soaking wet. And that's the way the wind blows most of the time. So it doesn't matter how far, if it's more than 500 feet or whatever, that's nothing.
Yes.
You keep
I
saying
stand
the
on my
values
porch,
that
I'm
you
gonna
project,
just-
those are only what you're guessing you might get?
I don't know about water.
I'm estimating on a very
You said it's new to
conservative.
Massachusetts.
I'm sorry?
You said it's new to Massachusetts, so
Yes.
it's only your best guess. There's no guarantee you might even see that.
What
There's
I,
other states that's been out a couple more years. There's been more growers coming online, the prices have gone down.
and that's why I've taken a
Colorado shows some
50%.
have gone out of business, have turned over to growing hemp. Because there's been a glut in growers. So it might be drastically different than what we see now.
And I'm factoring that all in, to be honest, right? My pricing is decreasing as time goes on because I do anticipate other growers coming online over time. But even with that said, I'm starting at a 50% discount rate to what we're seeing today in the market. And I don't anticipate that shifting drastically. Yes.
When did growing start in Massachusetts?
For medical or,
For marijuana in general, like these larger facilities, when did they start?
the first facility in the state of Massachusetts came online in 2015.
Okay, so it's just been a few years, because you said that there hasn't been any major thefts of facilities in Massachusetts. But in a quick Google search, I found, armed men going into these facilities many times over in other states. So just because it hasn't happened in the last 4 years, doesn't mean that couldn't happen here as well.
I mean, there's always a risk, but I've never read where gunmen come into a facility to rob a marijuana facility. I'm not aware of any of those types of
I just did a
situations.
quick Google search of it, and I found
Are you talking
about outdoor?
Are you talking retail or outdoor?
I think it might have been an indoor facility, I'm not sure, but there was a few of them where men have gone in and have like,
And I do think 4 years is a long time to have a clean track record. I don't think other businesses have that level of security to say that their industry has gone 4 years without it. I understand there's always a possibility of those things, But again, we would work very closely with our security vendors and the police department. The state regulations around cannabis, when it comes to security, was lifted and shifted from the nuclear power plant regulations here in the state of Massachusetts. So the security protocols that a nuclear power plant has to put into place are the same protocols that we as a cannabis operator have to put into place. Security
They
is-
have to have armed men on site all the time at a nuclear power plant.
No, they have
You
to
want-
have security staff on site, which we would have,
Through cameras.
we would have through cameras, and we would also have we could potentially have a patrol person there at the gate during the day and at night.
Halifax Patrol?
No, third party,
Okay.
yes,
You talked about creating jobs.
yes.
How many jobs are you thinking? What are these jobs? What's,
Right off the bat, I think we'll probably need about 25 employees to run this farm.
so you said 6 to 8 cars a day, but now you're saying 25 employees.
Well, those employees, in an outdoor facility, you don't have to have a full staff because there is a point in it where you're just saying, I'm leaving it up to fate. I can't make every plant perfect in a 100,000 square foot outdoor facility. And so these people come in shifts and droves, and so every other day they come and go, things like that. A lot of the staff that we'll be creating is to produce on the back end with how to process all of the product that we intend to make. Packaging and things like that. Yes.
You mentioned drilling wells. If you do project to go up to 600,000 square, how much water would you be drawing? Out of the aquifer, or
I don't know how much we'll be drawing at the
I believe
600.
everyone's on well water.
Yeah,
right?
Front Street's.
Yeah.
That whole end of town is over 20 people on the road.
Yeah, there's no town water in Front Street.
What about pesticides and fertilizer?
Pesticides and inorganic materials are not allowed under state regulations. I can get back to you on the water answer to give you a more clear answer.
Can I ask a question? You had mentioned that pesticides are not allowed, and yet from what I've read about the plants, they are susceptible to certain insects, and also the outdoor growing is susceptible to mold. So
Yes.
what do you plan on doing for mold?
So a lot of those issues arise when you're selling the plant in its pure flower form. And so that's an issue for those that are selling in that regard. Because we are processing everything through a chemical process, CO2, we're easily able to filter out any of those mold issues or pesticide issues just through science.
Is that why you'd be covering them at night?
We'd be covering them at night to keep them a little bit warmer because here in New England, the temperature climate, I mean, even in the summer, it gets down to 50.
So the crews would come in the morning and uncover them, or would it be mechanical operation?
Our first harvest would probably be manual, so they would come, and that's a good point. A lot of the staff that do come in the morning would come around 6 a.m. to just pull off tarps, and then they would leave. And then, another shift would come in during the day to maintain everything, and then a third shift could potentially come in of a few people to sort of retarp them.
And would you source your help locally? Or is it
Yeah, I
from
mean,
other towns?
ideally, we would love to find only local people, so that way we just have closer people to the vicinity of the property, make sure we have our eyes on the pulse. And, most people don't want to travel an hour when they have to be at work at like 5 a.m.
And that you specified it would be shift work, how many hour increments? Would it be 8 hours, or would it be 4 hours?
Yeah, to
Three
pull
shifts,
tarps would
4
probably be
weeks.
about 2 hours in the morning, and then another, 3 hours during the day, and then another 2 on the back end. It'd be like an 8-hour shift just broken out on a longer day. It'd be an 8-hour shift in like a
Broken
15-hour day.
So maybe the people coming from.
Well, the kids are going to school bus in the morning
So,
from May, June, September.
would, like, community, Halifax people have first dibs on the jobs, or?
Yeah, so we would do all of our initial posting locally, and we would obviously in our human resources plans require prioritization over local community residents, just like we do in Worcester and in Lakeville.
If you can go back to the map, where is the 5,000 square foot barn gonna be?
It's right here.
Is that a parking area next to it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Another question, are your plants there in the ground or any container plants?
So we haven't done soil testing yet. I would like to do it in the ground just because we can help clean up that land if we did it in the ground. Our initial game plan is to do a first harvest that we plan on just removing to clean out the soils, and that would be in the ground. If we come to determine from that and the soil testing that we'll be doing, if approved, that it can't be, then we would box it and dirt it. You had your hand up, sir?
Yeah, the first harvest, if you're not gonna use it, is that gonna be cannabis or hemp?
It would be hemp,
So you have a hemp license also?
yes.
And could you point out to me again where the leaching field for this facility would be? Would there be a leaching field the side of it
For
for
drainage.
drainage and any of that? Because I know it's wet.
Yeah, nothing drains there, so it's all running.
It's all like clay.
And there's about 200 feet
So-
of land in each
So
area.
Andy is the broker on the property. He could probably speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, my name is Andy Kushner. I work for Remax Commercial and represent the Hasiotis family in the sale of the property. As you all know, the property is much larger than the 40-odd acres that these guys are acquiring. And last month, the property was perked. Some in between the solar field and Wood Street. So there were perks that were witnessed by the Board of Health, and the plan would be to build a community septic system in that field that would be used by this and potentially other users that may go out there in the future.
Could you explain a little more what you mean by other users?
Yeah, elaborate a little.
Well, at this point,
I think what Andy is saying is the farm is very, very large, and I think the Hasiotis family is trying to divide it up similarly to what they did with this parcel of 47 acres. And so I think they've had troubles finding a place to percolate and put in a septic for the 1,500 acres. And I may be misspeaking, but my guess is as they continue to break this up, rather than each lot getting its own septic system, they would create a communal one for the whole 1,500 square feet. And so as they continue to break it up,
Square acres.
yes, sorry, acres. So I'm assuming that as they break these things up, they probably want to make sure that each lot has access to one large septic versus building multiple.
yeah, let me clarify that a little better. There were 2 test holes that were perked, approved, and verified by the Board of Health that would give enough land for a septic system that would support a small barn or building. Beyond that, we haven't done any more perking. But the point I'm making is that there are parts of the land that do perk that would enable a building to be supported with a septic system.
What type of building?
Well, the only building that I'm aware of is this building. The rest of the land is either been developed for solar, as an approval for additional solar, and is contemplated to be potentially more solar, but we don't have a user beyond that.
Sir?
So this proposal that I'm looking at here, and your first crop is gonna be proposed as possibly being hemp. Are we proposing this as an agricultural use that's going to change?
So,
Down the line, that's no longer going to be an agricultural use?
Currently, the property is zoned industrial, and currently under the state regulations, marijuana and hemp is defined as industrial use under the regulations. So everything we, unfortunately for my business, there's no like farming incentives
exemption.
or exemptions that we could tap into.
But they're off of hemp, correct? Hemp can be
Hemp can be-
farmed
Hemp can
in
be
agriculture.
Any agricultural, yes.
Yeah.
Cannabis can't.
Yes, ma'am.
We'd be owning this land or leasing it from the Hasiotis?
We would be purchasing this land.
Can you explain the packaging process within the building?
Within this building.
Within the structure, we've got a packaging building. Can you explain the packaging process a little bit?
In this building or in Lakeville?
Well, I'm looking at this here where it says Legend Packaging Building, I'm assuming
Yeah,
you're talking about the barn that's gonna be.
Yeah, so in there, we basically will pack it in, you know, either 10 or 25 pound vacuum seals and then just move it out. It's a very all of our drying, curing, and final packaging would happen in Lakeville. This packaging is really just to prepare it for transportation.
Prepping it for the road,
Yeah.
basically.
So could you go through the processing of taking the plants down? What is that, how much of the plant are you taking?
The whole plant. What we do is we come in and we cut it at the bottom of the plant, and then we would bring it into this facility, cut off all the branches, stems go in stems, flowers go in flowers. We have to track and weigh everything and report it to the state. How many stems, how many leaves, how many flowers. Once we do that, we package it accordingly and vacuum seal and send it out. Did that answer your question?
And all the material would be going to your Lakeville
Yes,
facility?
and then what we would do is if we plant in the ground, we then come through with a tractor and we deroot everything out of the ground, and only that would then be discarded. That's the only thing that gets thrown away and not used.
So where would it get discarded to?
So our Lakeville facility would process all of that too, because there are regulations that we need to abide by, which require us, as we discard root, it needs to be 25% root to 75% dirt. So there are machines that we have in Lakeville that basically are like paper shredders for these roots, and then we'll take old soil and add it. So we can work with a lot of vendors. There's a lot of waste management companies that are doing this now.
So is that material going to come back to the site?
No. There are,
So you're
waste
not-
management has services for this that we would use.
Okay, so you're not going to compost it and then
No.
bring it back?
I think he's talking about replenishing the soil for the next season.
In terms of nutrients, we're not removing any soil from the site.
Oh,
I want
okay.
to just point that out.
Just the waste of the stem or the?
We're just pulling out the root.
Roots.
Yeah.
So after you harvest and you're going into a new season, will you be fertilizing to bring the nutrients back into the soil?
No, cannabis is an interesting plant in that sense that a lot of our nutrient feed could potentially go through our irrigation system, and those are all organic.
I'd just like to see the drainage, more engineering on your plan is what I'm looking forward to. Because this seems a bit vague to a lot of people in this room.
So to clarify, we haven't started that process yet because it's pretty expensive to do all of those things from a civil engineering standpoint. We're sort of, I guess the board is sort of seeing community response to this before we dig into this. But as I alluded, we still have a long process to go, and the town has a special permit that we still need to get access to. And so at that point is when we would submit all of these plans, exactly what would be happening, and it would have to go through that approval process. So the board is not voting on yay or nay on this happening. It still has to go through any standard protocol of special permit. So I don't know the answer tonight. Yes.
So Lakeville gets a 3%, right?
They,
For what you do there?
yes.
Yes. So in the agreement online, it said that if you entered an agreement with another town and they charged less percentage, then we would have to go down.
No, that was, I did see that on the Facebook discussions. That was not how it was intended to be written. In fact, I didn't write the host community agreement, the town itself did. I've seen that regulation in many host community agreements. What it says is if any town gets a better host community agreement, we would have to notify you, and then the town would decide whether they want that or not. But the 3% is the maximum allowed by the state, and why you're starting to see communities get subpoenaed is because they're exceeding that. So I wouldn't sign a host community agreement that would be greater than that because I would be breaking the law.
Any further questions?
You mentioned a CFT after the 5-year period.
CFT.
There's, in the HCF, in the HCA, you mentioned that for the first 5 years there's a community impact fund, and then after the 5 years is an additional thing, which you call something completely different.
So I think Halifax is calling it a host community fund.
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing as a host community agreement fee.
Yeah, my concern is that these HCA's are only valid for 5 years, so how can you even put that in there?
Well, every the 5
And
year.
you can't have it in there because it's a contract that's exceeding 5 years. It would have to be taken out there. You're stating a condition that happens after the 5-year contract. And according to everything I read online, you can't do that. It can only be a 5-year contract. So you
I
have
think
to
what
go
it
back
says is
and-
that we would agree to another,
You
we
would-
would
yeah, you have to-
renegotiate,
you would-
and we would have to renegotiate
You have to, that is
because
correct.
that is required by
Right,
state
but you
law.
can't, I mean, right now it's stating in there that this is what's gonna happen after the 5-year period. And my point is, legally, you can't put that in there because the contract is only valid for 5 years. So that, I'm a little bit concerned with that language.
We can revisit it. Town council
Council's gonna look
thought
at it,
it was valid, and again, I did not write the host community agreement.
Right, no, I'm just pointing it out. 'Cause I was concerned,
I understand that.
reading through it, I was concerned with section 8 because the way I originally read it, it sounded like if you got 2.5 from
No,
like Truro or
I-
something like that, we
Definitely doesn't
have
work that way, I
2.5.
promise.
So there was a few things that were kind of like
Yeah.
vague that I just wanted some clarification on.
And to again reiterate, every 5 years we have the incentive to renegotiate
Right,
because
'cause you
without
can't
it, we
operate
can't
without
get,
it.
exactly.
Right. Yeah, now getting back to the odor, I know you're saying it's only like a 3-week period, and it's probably because it doesn't flower, because everything nice and
Correct.
flower.
It would be, it's like any flower, right? Like,
Yeah.
until it blooms, nothing really is there.
Right, yeah, because I was looking at different seeds and they had flowering periods of like 5 to 8 weeks.
You
which
did
is-
your homework, huh?
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now Truro actually has an open farm community as well, and there was concern with like residential neighbors with regards to the odors. So what they ended up putting into their HDA was the ability for the residential person that's within like, let's say, a certain distance, let's say 200,000 feet from the thing, to address the company and say, hey, we have an odor problem, to see if there's something that, that could be done. So I'm just wondering if, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the actual HCA that I saw at Truro, but are you open to that kind of?
Of course.
language?
I mean, if
To
you talk
address
to
the
any of our
concerns with-
communities
with
that
the
we've
odor.
been in, like, look, I live in Massachusetts, I grew up here, I'm not some person from out of state that's trying to make this, take all the money and run. I'm here. And so I say that because if you look at what we're doing in other communities, it's really a partnership. And like all of the residents that we're near, email me, they can contact me, we will provide whoever is the head of operations of that site will have their contact information. I'm not here to try to be a nuisance on the community. I just know that communities are gonna start opening up to this. And to miss out on all the gains that this community can get today, where in 3 years from now, you might be back in this room asking for this to happen, because the taxes and the job creation.
Well, it's also possible, because what I'm seeing is that the industry is actually pushing to get rid of the CIPs directly, because they are being abused by people saying, oh, we want, this donation for this particular
Yeah,
charity.
they want to
for
move
HDA.
towards like a template base, like
Right.
this is what you have to sign, this is what you can ask for.
Right, because,
Right.
everything I was reading is like, when I talked to Dave at the CCC, he was saying the same thing that Charlie was saying, but he was saying that, if you read the letter of the law 94G, it clearly states in there that you have to use it for specific expenses directly related to the impact thing. So he said to me that it was a gray area, and the fact that they're not looking at it legally, they don't care, all they get is a certificate of the HCA. They don't look at the HCA contract. All they care about is they get a certificate. Now, the CCC is actually pushing toward getting more
Yes.
control over the
Yes, they
CIP, which would then allow them to specifically say how you can actually use the money. So that's my concern, whereas we're sitting here saying, oh, we can use the money for like fireworks fund or that sort of stuff. But there is ongoing legislation, in fact, there's a bill out there right now, which would actually curtail that because the actual law states that it's supposed specifically used for impact assessments only.
Correct.
It's not, right, so it's like, when all these other towns that are using it for all these other purposes, I think we're gonna get in trouble if we go that route. I mean, legally, we could probably get away with it now.
I'm not
Because they're saying it's a
I'm not
gray area,
proposing
but-
anything in the gray area. I'm just saying
Right, I know.
3% of revenue,
Right,
and that's
right,
it.
and I know you can't tell us what to do with the money. I'm
Right.
just trying to point out that we're thinking that, oh, $1.3 million. But again, from everything that I'm seeing online, they're gonna start cracking down at some point on how you can spend that money. And I just want you guys to be aware of that.
I think if I could chime in, my professional opinion is that won't happen for at least the next 5 years. I think the state's gonna
Yeah,
see this first phase of host community agreements, how it all
Right, which
plays
is what
out.
Dave told me today, which is why Dave told me that they had no actually intention of actually expanding the 100,000 square feet for at least a few years, because they wanted to actually see the impact of the industry growing before they even think about talking about expanding it to 300,000,
I think it's
600,000.
I think it's gonna take about 2 years for them to change that. 'cause
Yeah, but
I know how
again,
long
my
it takes.
concern is you're giving me numbers based on your opinion, and you're sitting here saying to me, this is what you could get, so I'm gonna give you this number, and this may be fully what you believe, but everything that I see by talking to people in the government is there is nothing out there right now to change it from 100,000 square feet. So my concern is, we bake these.
It's still
these-
$300,000, sir.
Right. Yeah,
Plus
based on the
increase in
cost
tax
that you're
revenue.
saying, which I don't agree with because I've seen
Okay.
plenty of other costs. But, and you've already told me the costs are going down. So let's say let's say we can't go any bigger than 100,000 square feet, and that you don't get any other licenses, because again, you were limited to 100,000 square feet among all your licenses. And in the price, so even if we say your number's correct, $1,700, you already said in your agreement it's gonna go down, and that makes sense, supply, demand, as the supply increases, the price is gonna go down. So you're saying $300,000 now, but if that number, $100,000, does not go up to 600,000, then you're at 100,000, but instead of 1,700, you're now down to 1,100, which is a $600. So you're talking a significantly decrease in the revenue. So the point then is the amount of money that you're actually going to get in the CIP, which might actually drop down to as low as like $100,000, is that going to be worth the offset to other conditions? You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of other things. We've also got issues with the zoning law 167.9, which clearly states that, you can't have anything that produces a strong odor that interrupts the normal enjoyment of the property for the residents. So then you're gonna have to have special permit variances, and then you're gonna get into lawsuits with the town as they're saying, oh, you're violating the zoning bylaw and everything else like that. And I'd be happy to give you all this documentation that I provided, that I've looked at over the last 2 weeks with all my concerns. Because again, I'm thinking more in the financial. I could care less. I live on South Street. It's not gonna affect me at all. But I'm coming from, is this a good agreement financially? And I'm just concerned. That's all I'm saying. You might do it. I'm just concerned financially if it makes sense. If they crack down on how we can use the money and it really has to do with expenses. Charlie's already told me there really isn't a lot of extra expenses. Yeah, we could probably get away with fixing the roads, adding to the police details, but there isn't a lot of expenses due to the impact. I've already been told that multiple times. I mean, we've already heard there's not going to be that many cars down the road. So even fixing roads is kind of like,
What does it cost to fix?
you're in the gray area there as well.
I can tell you a lot of other towns
Million
use
and a
the
half,
funds for
million.
educational services.
I know they do, and that's fine. You can use the funds for educational services for like drug study, don't use drugs and all that other stuff. There are ways to use the money. I'm just concerned that we talk this huge amount of money, like $1.3 million, and I don't see the numbers. They're not there right now. They might get there, but do you want to make a decision on something that might come to pass? To me, it's like, these are the numbers that exist in today's world. This is the money that you can actually get in today's world. And leave it at that, and make the decision based on that. Not like this, this is a perfect world, this is
Yeah.
what we might get.
Not to cut you off, but
But that's fine. I just
at
wanna-
town meeting, we develop a budget that we're projecting we're gonna get so much money.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
tax and
Projecting
stuff come in,
revenue.
it's the same thing, we're projecting revenue, we're doing the same thing as town as he's doing. You're hoping that this is what comes about, doesn't necessarily mean it will come about.
I agree, I just wanted to let you know that I've done a lot of the financial, looking at the numbers, and I just wanted you to be aware that the numbers just don't seem to add up to me. Now, again, I'm not making any justification on whether you do it or not. I'm just saying, do you want to make decisions based on this is a perfect world 4 years down the road, these are the numbers that we're projecting, when there's no discussions whatsoever of increasing the size of lots and that sort of stuff?
So from your perspective, being on the finance committee, if you could guarantee a $300,000 income,
And you could use it for anything, then I'd probably say yes.
At what number would it not be realistic for you?
Well, again, there's a lot of different factors, because I have to take a look at, I look at things like, well, we're gonna have a decrease there is gonna be a decrease in the residential property tax in that area. And then I have to think here, okay, what is the revenue that we're actually gonna get in? So to me, as long as we can produce a positive revenue and have minimal disruption to the community, in other words, they shouldn't actually have to wear gas masks to go outside for a 3-week period of time in the middle of summer. In
Can
other
I
words-
stop you?
Yeah,
That's
I know,
not
I'm
the
just saying,
scenario.
I
I
know,
don't want you
I
to frighten people,
I
you know,
know, I'm just saying,
because you did 2 weeks of research.
yes, I agree.
Okay,
Research, I'm just pointing out that.
time to cut this off.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I can't give you
Yeah.
an answer
Yeah.
because of the fact that the numbers, I don't have.
In all
accurate numbers to
fairness,
give you.
you've been given legal length of time to talk.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Right, okay, let's cut off at this point.
It-
And not saying that what you're talking about is not pertinent, but we can't even project how many kids we're gonna have in school next year, how much we're gonna pay on this. It's a guess week. And hopefully, we're dealing with what's happening now.
Right, and that's,
Yeah,
that's all
and
I'm
the
saying.
agreement we have now, if in fact he produces the stuff or not, it's gonna be 300,000 or less. So I can't promise you that $1 million is gonna come out. I can't promise I'm gonna even be here in 1 million years.
Yeah, all I'm just saying is, I just want to say, it's basically just,
Well, that's what we
just
started
look
to
at
talk
the
about
numbers. That's all I'm
originally.
saying, just look at the numbers. I'm just concerned that I just don't see anything to support those numbers out there. The initial number I can see that. I'm just concerned when you're projecting out that far out, based on what I'm seeing in the legislature right now, I just don't see how that number's to support it.
All right, I'd like to make one comment as the VP of the community outreach here, is that one of the things that we pride ourselves on is trying to be as transparent as possible. And we're basing our estimates on Alex's expertise in the field. We've gone to different communities. It's a very fluid industry. It's, we don't know, and what, right, but what we're saying is, based upon what we do know, this is what we envision it being, and we just wanted to present as many facts to you guys tonight. And again, appreciate all of you coming out and showing the interest in this, because it's terrific that your community cares that much. Our point is, we want to be a good partner for you and generate revenues for you and do it in the least disruptive way possible. And again, I understand the concerns of residents who live nearby, and I think he actually even missed the whole point about if we send extra police around, there's gonna be more police on the roads that your kids are on. So, again.
And all I'm coming from is a revenue thing. I just want to make sure that in the end, it doesn't hurt us revenue-wise. That's all I'm saying.
So is there anybody else that hasn't spoken yet? Because I want to hear from everyone that's here, whether or not if you're in favor of it or not. Because this is the first step. If the community's not in favor of this, then I don't see why the selectmen would move forward.
A 5,000 square foot.
How come we get 2 buildings listed on the legend?
So it's what we're doing.
Well, they got one in the back corner.
Where here?
2.
No, this was a suggested additional parking in the event we ever could expand. This 2 would be. I don't know why that says that there. This is parking. There would be one long. It would be one long 5,000 square foot building, so it could be like an assembly line.
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Yeah.
Looking at two buildings.
No 2 buildings, just one. I don't, that was a error, sorry.
And how tall will the wall be, the fence?
I would, what I plan on proposing is 8 to 10 feet.
No, would you plant, have plant, so it looks natural to the neighbors, so we're not looking at,
It would look like an
like,
organized
because they didn't
farm.
do that with the solar field. So I'm wondering, you're gonna be on the side, my backyard, my kitchen window is looking right at you.
So you're looking to have a buffer zone put
Buffer
up?
zone with some sort of structures being planted, that would grow into, in 10 years, you might not see it at all. But you'll still get your light.
Maybe I'm not understanding fully. Cannabis plants don't regrow.
No, he's
Alex, what he's talking about,
He doesn't want to see the fence.
what he's talking about.
A green buffer. Mitigate his
Yeah.
view.
We could totally, we can maybe put trees around that fence,
Yeah.
to maybe mitigate,
Because I'm looking
I'm not
at the
opposed
back
to that.
porch, so
I'm not opposed to that at all. If we go further in this process, I would totally be
Because
open to that.
I'm not, saying no, but it's gonna jeopardize the value of my home huge.
Well,
Because I'd like to invite you over and
please,
sit on my back porch and just have a conversation of what I'm gonna be looking at.
sure. I hear you. What I will say on the property value, that something that just came to me, I'm not building a structure that's if it doesn't pan out, it's still just an empty field, and that's it.
I mean, you keep pointing that out, but if someone's coming in and they're just looking at like the real estate and they're looking to buy a house, they're looking at a gorgeous field and a beautiful sunrise and the storms coming across it.
I mean, I walk that field, there's a lot of trash all over the place, and
It's beautiful.
tires,
But
and,
that's only
but-
one specific area.
okay.
But there's a big difference between looking at that, coming in and just like looking at the area to buy and seeing that versus seeing a 10-foot tall fence and a 5,000-foot building.
I understand, I understand.
That's
Not that I'm proposing to advocate for it or not advocate for it, but you have to also keep in mind the Hasiotis family is committed to selling this property. It's zoned industrial, and honestly, there's all kinds of things that could end up on this thing that we have no control over.
A tire recycling plant, which was proposed.
Yes, Chief.
One question, in regards to the security plans.
Yes.
Excuse me, a little respect.
The CCC sets up the criteria that you
Did I
need
do that?
for security plan. In your experience with other communities and speaking with other chiefs, have they had any input in basically, you're saying 8 to 10 feet, that's, what about if we want to increase the requirements that the CCC puts out?
Yeah, I mean, again, we can include in the special permit that we would need your approval in addition to meeting.
You don't need my approval though,
Well, your security.
because the CCC sets the
Well,
criteria.
we have to set that,
Right.
but you could exceed that
Okay.
if you choose to, and then I'd have to come up to that,
Okay.
which is already very high.
Right, I
I'm
understand.
sure once you read
Yeah,
it,
it
you'll
is very
realize,
high, and
yeah.
I understand.
But you could set a higher benchmark if you feel as the chief.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank
I
you.
do appreciate it. I know there are concerns and things like that. It's my proposal, and I think the benefits outweigh the concerns and the risks.
what the board would like for you to do, if you have any major concerns, please give it to us in writing so we can have it on record as to what is and is not good for your particular area. And we will seriously look into it. This is not the end for all. As you stated earlier, there's still a process they gotta go through, there'll be other hearings. So you still have an opportunity to voice your opinion if you didn't think of something tonight. But it would be really helpful to us if you could write down any of your concerns.
And I have
Sure.
business cards, if you want my information to shoot me a note, I'll be here to give them out if you like.
You have an invitation, right, already?
Yeah.
I'd like that, please.
Yeah.
And he wants a Coca-Cola too.
Yeah, you want a Coca-Cola? All right, thank you. It's nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. Thank you for coming.
Now, are you gonna barbecue at your house?
Yeah.
Do I have to bring
We didn't
anything?
get invited.
I do the cooking. May I have one of those? All right, thank you, guys.
I don't understand it. A stranger comes in town, you invite him to dinner, and we've been here.
Yeah, everybody's welcome.
I guess the next step is the board is looking for feedback from the community. Is
Yes.
that, I don't wanna misspeak, but
Yes.
is that the
No,
next step?
that's it. If you, me casa, you casa.
And I've got cards, but it's greg@budsgoods.com. Send me an email, I'll send you the presentation, whatever, try to answer any questions that you have.
And it's Alex at Bud's Goods.
And please drive safely outside. The police department here will give tickets out.
Thank you again for your.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.